Alina Vasquez walked into the council chamber for what she knew would be the last time. Her hands were steady, but her heart felt heavy. She had spent 15 years as Earth's main ambassador to the Galactic Council. 15 years of late nights, impossible negotiations, and solving problems that seemed to have no answers. Today, she would end all of that. The chamber was massive. They built to hold representatives from 300 different species. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others floated in tanks of liquid methane. A few existed as clouds of organized particles. The room's technology translated every word into every language instantly. It was a wonder of galactic cooperation, and humans had helped build it. Alina stepped up to the speaking platform. The room grew quiet. Every eye, sensor, and awareness focused on her. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice calm and clear, "I stand before you today to announce that humanity is withdrawing from this body. Effective immediately, Earth will close all embassies, recall all diplomats, and end all official participation in council affairs." The silence broke instantly. The Krillian representative, a being that looked like a giant mantis made of crystal, clicked its mandibles in what Alina had learned was laughter. "You are bluffing, Ambassador," the Krillian said. "Humans always bluff when they want more resources or better treatment. We have seen this before." Zethran High Chancellor, who resembled a floating jellyfish covered in glowing patterns, pulsed with colors that meant amusement. "Humans need the Council more than the Council needs humans. You will return within one cycle. Perhaps two." Alina had expected this. For 2 centuries, humans had been the ones everyone called when things went wrong. When the Dravian mining dispute threatened to become a war, humans had found a solution. When the Keltorian plague needed a cure, human scientists had worked day and night to create one. When trade agreements fell apart, humans rebuilt them. When peace talks failed, humans made them work. And what had humanity received in return? Demands for more help. Criticism when solutions were not perfect. Blame when other species refused to follow the agreements humans had carefully constructed. "We are not bluffing," Alina said quietly. "We are exhausted." The ancient Worman observer, who sat in a special chamber at the back of the room, shifted for the first time in decades. The Wormen were old, so old that they had seen the rise and fall of empires humans could barely imagine. They rarely spoke, only observed and recorded. But now, the Worman's synthetic voice filled the chamber. "This is unwise," the Worman said. "The Council does not understand what it is losing, and the Council will learn," Alina replied. She took a deep breath. "For 200 years, humanity has served this body with dedication. We have mediated your disputes. We have prevented your wars. We have found compromises when you said none existed. And we have done this while our own planet suffered from neglect. Our resources have gone to solving your problems. Our best minds have been devoted to your crises. Our people have died trying to keep your peace." She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes and sensors as she could. "We told you this day would come. We warned you that we could not do this forever. We asked you to learn to solve problems yourselves, to talk to each other instead of demanding we talk for you, to think about long-term solutions instead of quick fixes. You nodded and agreed, and then the next crisis came, and you called for humans again." The Methodian ambassador, a reptilian being covered in purple scales, stood up. "If humans leave, who will maintain the buffer zone between Methodia and Cassia? That agreement took years to build." "That is your problem now," Alina said. "We built the framework. We showed you how it works. Now, you must maintain it yourselves." "But we do not have the skill," the Methodian began. "Then develop the skill," Alina interrupted, her voice harder now. "We are not your parents. We are not your servants. We are a species that tried to help build something better, and instead, we became the ones you expected to fix everything. That ends today." The Trader Guild representative, a being that looked like a collection of floating metal spheres, spoke up. "The commercial courts rely on human judges. Without them, we will have chaos." "You had commercial courts before humans arrived," Alina said. "You can have them again." But they were corrupt, biased. The human system is fair. So make your own system fair, Elena said. Study how we did it. Apply the principles. It is not magic. It is work. Hard work. Work we are no longer willing to do for you. She paused, letting her words sink in. Around the chamber, representatives were beginning to look worried. The Krillians' laughter had stopped. The Zetherans' colors had shifted to confusion. Humanity's final message to the Council is simple, Elena said. We are done. Figure it out yourselves. We will defend our borders, maintain our treaties with species who treated us as equals rather than tools, focus on our own development. We wish you well. But we will not return to save you from yourselves. She stepped down from the platform and walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop her. They were too shocked. As Elena left the building and boarded her ship, she felt the weight of years lift from her shoulders. She was 57 years old. She had joined the diplomatic corps at 22, full of hope and idealism. She had believed that humans could make a difference, that they could help build a better galaxy, and they had made a difference. But the cost had been too high. The ship lifted off from Centrum Prime, the Council's home planet. Elena watched through the window as the planet grew smaller. Within weeks, every human diplomat in the galaxy would be doing the same thing. Coming home. Leaving the galaxy to manage itself, in her briefcase, Elena carried Earth's final official communication to the Council. It would be transmitted once all humans were safely back in Earth's solar system. The message was short. We warned you. We told you what would happen. You laughed. Now you will understand. As the ship jumped into faster-than-light travel, Elena allowed herself to cry. Not from sadness, but from relief. She was going home. Finally, she was going home. Back in the council chamber, the Warman observer remained in place, watching the other representatives argue about what to do. They did not understand yet, but they would. Very soon, they would understand exactly what they had lost. The Warman had seen this pattern before, thousands of years ago with another species that had tried to hold the galaxy together. That species had not survived the burden. Humans were wiser. They had walked away before it destroyed them, but the galaxy was not wise, and it was about to learn a very hard lesson. 3 months had passed since the last human diplomat left Centrum Prime. The Galactic Council had continued its work, confident that things would settle down. Some species even celebrated. Finally, they said, it could make decisions without humans always suggesting compromises and careful approaches. The first real crisis started in Sector 7. In the busy trade routes where hundreds of species bought and sold goods worth trillions of credits, 2 merchant guilds, the Brentix Consortium and the Palladian Trade Alliance, had a dispute over a contract. The contract was worth billions, and both sides claimed they had fulfilled their parts while the other had cheated for 90 years. Such disputes had been handled by the Human Commercial Court, a system that Ambassador Vasquez herself had designed. The court had 3 human judges who studied each case carefully, listened to all sides, and made fair decisions. Both guilds had agreed to use this court in their original contract, but now there were no human judges. The court building in Sector 7 stood empty. The Brentix Consortium demanded payment. The Palladian Alliance refused. Harsh words were exchanged. Then threats. Then actions. The Brentix Consortium seized 3 Palladian ships. The Palladian Alliance blockaded a Brentix station. Within days, trade in the entire sector began to slow down. Other species who depended on those trade routes started to panic. The council held an emergency session. The Krillian representative, the same one who had laughed at Elena's resignation speech, stood before the assembly with what humans would have recognized as confidence. I will resolve this matter, the Krillian announced. My species has great experience in commercial law. I will serve as judge. The Warman observer said nothing, but recorded everything. The Krillian reviewed the case for 2 days, then made a ruling. The Brentix Consortium won completely. The Palladian Alliance had to pay everything, plus penalties. There was just one problem. The Krillian judge was related, in a complex way, to the Brentix Consortium's leadership. The relationship was legal, under Krillian law. But it created what humans had called a conflict of interest. 17 species immediately protested. They withdrew their ships from Sector 7. They canceled contracts with Brentix companies. They demanded the ruling be overturned. The Krillian refused. Under his species law, the decision was final. Within a week, Sector 7's economy had collapsed. Thousands of ships sat idle. Millions of workers lost their jobs. Species that had cooperated for generations stopped talking to each other. The council tried to intervene, but no one could agree on a solution. Every species that offered to judge the case was accused of bias by one side or the other. The arguments went in circles. Nothing was resolved. While the council struggled with the trade crisis, a worse problem was growing on the border between the Mathodian Empire and the Cassian Alliance. For 60 years, humans had maintained a careful buffer zone between these two powers. The Mathodians and Cassians had been enemies for centuries before joining the council. They had fought 3 major wars, each more destructive than the last. The human-designed buffer zone had kept peace by creating a neutral area where neither side could build military bases or move large fleets. The system worked because human observers monitored it constantly. They used satellites, patrol ships, and diplomatic check-ins to make sure both sides followed the rules. More importantly, human negotiators met with both sides regularly, addressing small problems before they became big ones. When humans left, they took all of this with them. The satellites were shut down. The patrol ships went home. The diplomatic meetings stopped. For the first month, nothing happened. Both sides were cautious. But then, a Cassian mining ship accidentally crossed into the buffer zone. It was a simple navigation error, the kind of mistake that happens sometimes. Under the human system, the ship would have been politely escorted back. A report would have been filed. Everyone would have moved on. But there were no human observers to handle it politely. Instead, a Mathodian patrol spotted the ship and assumed it was a military probe. The patrol opened fire, destroying the mining ship. 200 Cassian workers died. The Cassian Alliance was outraged. They demanded an apology and compensation. The Mathodian Empire refused, saying they had every right to defend their border. The Cassians moved a fleet to the edge of the buffer zone. The Mathodians matched them. Both sides sent urgent messages to the council, demanding support. The council held debates. Some species sided with Mathodia. Others supported Cassia. Many wanted to stay neutral. The arguments went on for weeks while the fleets faced each other across the buffer zone. Weapons ready. Back on Earth, the news feeds showed everything. Humans watched the galaxy they had worked so hard to unite begin to tear itself apart. Some felt vindicated. They had warned the council this would happen. Others felt sad. They had given so much to build something better. Alina Vasquez sat in her small house in Argentina, reading messages from former colleagues. The Zetheran High Chancellor, the same one who had said humans would return within 2 cycles, had sent a formal request for Earth to mediate the Mathodian Cassian crisis. The message was polite, even apologetic. But it still assumed humans would help. Alina deleted the message without responding. Her assistant, a young woman named Maria, who had worked with Alina for 5 years, came to visit her. "They keep calling," Maria said. "Every day, more messages. The Warman Observer wants to talk to you. He says the situation is critical." "It is critical," Alina agreed, "and they need to handle it themselves. But people are dying." "That Cassian mining ship I know," Alina said quietly. "I know, and it breaks my heart. But Maria, we cannot keep doing this. For 200 years, we have been the galaxy's problem solvers. Do you know what that has cost us?" Maria nodded slowly. She had seen the numbers. While humans had been busy preventing galactic wars, Earth's own infrastructure had decayed. Schools needed repairs. Hospitals needed equipment. Research into human diseases had been underfunded because the best scientists were working on galactic problems. Earth's brightest minds had been solving other people's crises instead of building humanity's future. "They have to learn," Alina said. "It will be painful." Some of them may not survive the learning process. But if we go back now, if we fix this crisis, they will never learn. In 5 years or 10 years, there will be another crisis, and another, and they will always expect us to save them. So we do nothing? Maria asked. We wait, Alina said. We watch, and we hope they figure it out before it is too late. But watching was harder than Alina had expected. Every news report showed the situation getting worse. The trade routes were breaking down. The Mathodine-Cashian standoff was heating up. And the Council, that great symbol of galactic unity, was falling apart as species blamed each other for the growing chaos. The Worm Observer sent one final message to Alina. It was not a request for help. It was a simple question. Did you know this would happen so quickly? Alina responded with one word. Yes, 6 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council was dying. The Grand Chamber on Centrum Prime, once filled with representatives working toward common goals, had become a place of shouting and accusations. Species that had been allies for centuries now refused to speak to each other. The Worm Observer watched it all from his special chamber. He had lived for 5,000 years and had seen many things, but this collapse was happening faster than he had expected. Humans had not just been mediators, they had been the glue holding everything together. The trade crisis in Sector 7 had spread like a disease. When the economy there collapsed, it affected dozens of other sectors. Ships that carried food could not travel safely. Medical supplies were stuck at closed borders. Species that depended on trade for basic necessities began to suffer. The Council tried to fix it. They formed committees. They wrote proposals. They held votes. But every solution was blocked by someone. The Krillians refused to admit their judge had been biased. The Palladian Alliance wanted revenge. The 17 species that had withdrawn from Sector 7 demanded apologies that never came what humans would have resolved. In weeks with patient negotiation and creative, compromises dragged on for months, with no progress. The Warman decided to try something different. He searched through the human diplomatic archives, looking for procedures and protocols that might help. He found detailed guides on how to run negotiations, how to build consensus, how to find common ground between opposing sides. He studied them carefully. Then he called for a special council session to address the Sector 7 crisis. The Warman presented his plan. He had followed the human protocols exactly. He proposed a new court with judges from neutral species. He suggested a compromise where both the Brentix Consortium and Palladian Alliance would make concessions. He outlined steps to rebuild trust and restart trade. It was a good plan. On paper, it looked just like something the humans would have created, but it failed completely. The problem was not the plan itself. The problem was knowing when to use it. Humans had an instinct for timing. They knew when to push and when to wait. They knew which species needed to be approached privately before a public session. They knew who needed to feel like they had won something, even in a compromise. They knew how to read the subtle signs of body language, tone, and cultural cues that indicated whether a negotiation was ready to move forward. The Worman had the procedures, but not the instinct. He presented his plan at the wrong time, in the wrong way, to the wrong audience. Species that might have accepted it a month earlier were now too angry. Leaders who might have compromised were now too committed to their positions. The plan was rejected. The crisis continued. Meanwhile, the situation between the Methodian Empire and the Cassian Alliance grew more dangerous every day. The fleets facing each other across the buffer zone had been reinforced. What had started with a dozen ships on each side now involved hundreds. Weapons were charged and ready. Both sides were convinced the other would attack first. Small incidents kept happening. A Cassian patrol boat strayed too close to the Methodian fleet and was fired upon. A Methodian supply ship was scanned by Cassian sensors and interpreted it as a targeting lock. Each incident made both sides more paranoid and aggressive. The Council sent 12 different delegations to try to mediate. None of them succeeded. The Methodians did not trust anyone who seemed friendly to the Cassians. The Cassians did not trust anyone who seemed friendly to the Methodians. Species that tried to stay neutral were accused of not caring by both sides. Then came the breaking point. A junior Cassian officer, and frightened by the constant tension, made a terrible mistake. He misread a sensor reading and thought the Methodian fleet was charging weapons for an attack. He sent an alert to his commanders. The alert triggered automatic defensive protocols. Cassian ships powered up their weapons and shields. The Methodians saw this as an act of aggression. They powered up their own weapons. Within seconds, both fleets were at maximum alert, fingers on triggers. Waiting for someone to fire the first shot, a human negotiator would have had direct communication lines to both fleets. They would have called both commanders immediately, calmed the situation, clarified the misunderstanding before it escalated. But there were no human negotiators. There were no direct lines. By the time the council even heard about the crisis, the first shots had already been fired. The war that followed was brutal. The Methodians and Cassians had been preparing to fight each other for 60 years. They knew each other's tactics and weaknesses. The battles were efficient and deadly. Within 2 weeks, the war spread. Both sides had allies, old treaties that required support if either was attacked. Species that had nothing to do with the original mining ship incident found themselves being pulled into the conflict. The Dravian Empire sided with Methodia because of a trade agreement signed 40 years earlier. The Kaltorian Union supported Cassia because Methodians had once occupied one of their colonies. The Zethran Collective tried to stay neutral, but was forced to choose when. Methodian ships violated their space soon. 40% of known space was involved in the war. Planets that had never seen combat in living memory were being bombed. Space stations were destroyed. Refugee ships fled from war zones, overwhelming peaceful systems that tried to help them. The galactic economy, already damaged by the trade crisis, completely collapsed. Currency values crashed, supply chains broke. Food shortages appeared on dozens of worlds. Medical systems could not cope with the wounded. And through it all, the council was powerless. Representatives stopped coming to Centrum Prime, some because travel was too dangerous, some because their home worlds were under attack, some because they no longer believed the council served any purpose. The Grand Chamber stood almost empty. The worm and observer remained, still watching, still recording. The few representatives who still attended spent their time blaming each other instead of finding solutions. On Earth, humans watched the galactic news with horror. The war they had prevented for 60 years was now happening. Millions were dying. Civilizations were being damaged in ways that would take generations to repair. 12 species sent delegations to Earth's solar system, begging for humanity to return and stop the war. They approached Earth's defensive perimeter and broadcast their pleas. "We were wrong. We need you. Please help us." The automated defense systems responded with a recorded message. It was Elena Vasquez's voice, calm and clear. "We warned you. We told you what would happen. You laughed. This is the consequence of your choices. We will not save you from yourselves." The delegations waited at the edge of Earth's system for days, hoping for a different response. None came. Eventually, they turned around and went home to their dying civilizations. Inside Earth's borders, humanity debated. Some argued they should help, that standing by while millions died was morally wrong. Others argued that going back now would only restart the cycle. The galaxy would never learn if humans always rescued them. Alina received thousands of messages daily, former colleagues begging for her to convince Earth to return, leaders offering anything humanity wanted in exchange for help. Even the Krillian representative who had laughed at her resignation speech sent an apology and a plea. She deleted them all. One night, Maria came to visit Alina again. She found the former ambassador sitting in her garden, watching the stars. Maria sat down beside her without speaking for a long time. "They are destroying themselves," Maria finally said. "Yes," Alina agreed. "We could stop it, could we?" Lena asked. "Or would we just pause it? Would we negotiate another ceasefire, another buffer zone, another agreement that they expect us to maintain forever? And then in 10 years or 20 years, when we are tired again, when we try to leave again, would it all fall apart even worse?" Maria did not have an answer. "They need to learn to save themselves," Alina said softly. That is the only way this ends. Either they learn or they destroy themselves. We cannot keep catching them every time they fall. That is not helping them. That is enabling them. But even Alina was beginning to wonder if she had made the right choice. The cost of teaching this lesson was so high. Was there a point where the price became too great? She did not know. All she could do was wait and hope that somewhere, somehow, the species of the galaxy would find a way to stop their own destruction. The war was now in its 4th month, and the galaxy was burning. What had started as a conflict between two empires had grown into the largest war in galactic history. 70% of known space was now involved in fighting. Billions had died. Entire planets had been left uninhabitable. The Methodian Empire and Cassian Alliance were both exhausted, but neither would surrender. Pride and anger kept the war going even when both sides knew they were destroying themselves. Their allies kept fighting too, pulled along by old treaties and new grudges. On Centrum Prime, the council building was almost abandoned. Only the Worm and Observer remained, along with 3 junior staff members who maintained the basic systems. The Grand Chamber, where 300 species had once gathered, now echoed with emptiness. The Worman had spent months trying to understand what humans had done that seemed so impossible for everyone else. He had studied thousands of hours of recordings, read millions of pages of diplomatic reports, and analyzed every peace treaty humans had ever negotiated. He finally understood the problem. Humans did not just follow procedures. They understood something deeper about how different minds worked, how cultures thought, how to build trust between beings who had nothing in common except the desire to survive. It was not something that could be easily taught or copied. It was an art as much as a science, and the galaxy had lost it. The Worman made a decision. The species of the galaxy could not see what they had lost. He would show them. He spent 2 weeks preparing a special transmission. He gathered the best examples of human diplomacy from the archives. Recordings of Ambassador Vasquez negotiating the Dravian mining dispute. Videos of Ambassador Chen preventing the Keltorian plague from becoming a war over resources. Audio of Ambassador Okonkwo talking down a fleet commander who was ready to fire on civilians. The Worman edited it all together into a 4-hour presentation. Then he did something that had never been done before. He used the Council's emergency broadcast system to send the transmission to every single species in known space. To every planet, every ship, every station. The transmission could not be blocked or ignored. Billions of beings stopped what they were doing and watched. They saw Alina Vasquez sitting across from 2 leaders who hated each other. Listening patiently as they yelled and accused, they watched. As she asked simple questions, guided them to see each other's perspectives, helped them find a solution that both could accept. They saw the relief and surprise on both leaders' faces when they realized they did not have to be enemies. They saw Ambassador Chen working 20 hours a day during the Keltorian plague crisis, coordinating medical teams, managing resource distribution, and preventing panic. They watched her refuse to let species blame each other for the disease, keeping everyone focused on the solution instead of finding someone to punish. They saw Ambassador Okonkwo, the most powerful moment of the entire transmission, talking to a fleet commander whose planet had just been attacked. The commander was ready to destroy a civilian station in revenge. Okonkwo did not argue or give orders. He simply asked, "What will your children think of you when they learn you did this? What will you tell them when they ask why?" The commander had broken down in tears and stood down his fleet. The transmission showed dozens of moments like these. Human diplomats being patient when others were angry. Finding creative solutions when others said none existed. Building bridges when others wanted to burn them. And most importantly, doing. All of this not because they gained something from it, but because they believed a better galaxy was possible. The final part of the transmission showed the humans leaving. It showed Elena's resignation speech, played in full. It showed the empty embassies, the abandoned diplomatic stations, the dark windows of the human commercial court. And then the transmission showed what had happened after the humans left: the collapsed economy, the trade wars, the shooting at the buffer zone, the war that now consumed the galaxy, the millions of dead, the burning planets. The Worman's voice, ancient and sad, accompanied the final images. This is what we lost, he said. Not servants or tools. It's not fixers who existed to solve our problems. We lost teachers who showed us how to be better than we were. We lost partners who believed in us more than we believed in ourselves. We lost the only species who could see past their own interests to imagine what we could all become together. The transmission ended with a simple question in every language. What will we do now? The effect was immediate and profound. The transmission spread through the galaxy faster than any news had ever traveled. It was copied, shared, and discussed on every world. People who had blamed humans for abandoning them suddenly understood what had really happened. On the front lines of the war, soldiers watched the transmission in their bunkers and ships. A Cassian pilot, after watching Ambassador Okonkwo's moment, with the fleet commander, refused to launch a bombing run on a Methodian civilian target. Her entire squadron followed her example. A Methodian general, after seeing Elena's patient negotiation work, contacted his Cassian counterpart under a flag of truce. They talked for the first time in months. They did not reach an agreement, but they talked. It was a start. The transmission also caused anger. Some species felt ashamed of how they had treated humans. That shame turned into defensiveness. The Krillian representative who had laughed at Elena's speech and then failed as a judge issued a public statement attacking the transmission as human propaganda designed to make other species feel guilty. But most beings felt something different. They felt regret. And more importantly, they felt determination. Student groups formed on dozens of worlds. Young beings who had watched the transmission started studying human diplomatic techniques. They shared what they learned, debated how to apply human approaches to their own cultures, and began to imagine how they might solve their own problems. Trade guilds in Sector 7, still paralyzed by the dispute that had started the economic collapse, decided to try something new. They asked the student groups for help. Young beings with fresh eyes and no stake in the old. Grudges looked at the problem and found solutions the experienced merchants had missed. It took 3 weeks of careful work, but they resolved the dispute. Both sides made concessions. Both sides gained something. Trade in Sector 7 slowly began to restart. It was not perfect. It was not as smooth as when humans had handled such disputes. But it worked, and the beings who made it work learned something valuable. They could do this. It was hard, and they would make mistakes. They could learn. On the Methodian Cassian front, the unofficial ceasefire was holding. Both sides were exhausted from 4 months of war. The transmission had given them an excuse to stop fighting without admitting defeat. Quiet talks began, mediated not by the council, but by some of the student groups who had studied human techniques. The talks were messy. They almost broke down a dozen times. But the young mediators kept trying, kept learning from their mistakes, kept pushing both sides to see past their anger. Slowly, very slowly, progress was made. Alina watched all of this from Earth. The transmissions from across the galaxy showed her the impact of the Warman's broadcast. She saw the student groups. She saw the renewed efforts at peace. She saw beings trying to learn what humans had tried to teach them. For 200 years, she also saw the mistakes they were making. The clumsy negotiations. The compromises that would not last. The solutions that did not address root problems. She wanted to reach out, to guide them, to help them do it better. But she did not. This was their journey now. They had to learn by doing. Even if doing meant failing sometimes. Maria visited again and found Alina, watching the galactic news feeds with tears in her eyes. They are trying, Maria said softly. Yes, Alina agreed. Finally, they are trying. Do you think they will succeed? Alina was quiet for a long time before answering. I do not know. But for the first time since I gave that resignation speech, I have hope. The Warman sent Alina a private message that night. It was simple and direct. The students want to learn. They need teachers. Not to return to the council. Not to solve the galaxy's problems, but to teach them how to solve problems themselves. Would you consider it? Alina read the message 3 times. This was different from the other pleas she had received. This was not asking humans to fix things. This was asking humans to share their knowledge so others could fix things themselves. She thought about it all night. By morning, she had made her decision. Alina sat in a conference room on Earth with 200 other former diplomats. They had come from all over the planet, answering her call for a meeting. Some were retired like her. Others had moved on to different careers. But all of them had served in the Galactic Council, and all of them had watched the galaxy nearly destroy itself. "The Warman has made a proposal," Alina began. "Not for us to return to the Council, not to fix their problems, but to teach a new generation of galactic diplomats how to fix problems themselves." She displayed the detailed plan the Warman had sent. A diplomatic academy on a neutral moon, students from every species who wanted to learn, human teachers sharing their knowledge, their techniques, their experience. "This is different," Alina continued. "We would not be doing the work for them. We would be showing them how to do it, teaching them to think long-term, to find creative compromises, to build trust across cultural differences. And then we would let them do it." The room was quiet. Everyone was thinking about what this meant. Ambassador Chen, who had managed the Keltorian plague crisis years ago, spoke first. "What if they fail? What if we teach them and they still cannot maintain peace?" "Then they fail," Alina said bluntly. "And they learn from failure. We cannot protect the galaxy from all harm. We can only give them the tools to protect themselves. We would be watching them fail," another diplomat said. "Watching beings die because our students made mistakes. Can we accept that?" Alina nodded slowly. "It will be hard. Maybe the hardest thing we have ever done. But if we do not teach them, if we just keep solving their problems, the galaxy will never grow up. The next time we leave, it will collapse again. Maybe worse than this time." Ambassador Okonkwo, the one who had talked down the fleet commander in the famous transmission, spoke up. "I think we should do it. Not because I want to return to that life, but because what we built should not die with us. Our knowledge, our approaches, our belief that different species can work together, that should continue, even if we are not the ones doing the work anymore." The debate went on for hours. Some diplomats argued they had earned their rest and should not return to galactic service in any form. Others felt obligated to help prevent more death and destruction. Some worried about Earth's needs being neglected again. Others believed teaching was different from doing and would require far less from humanity. In the end, they voted. The proposal passed, but with conditions. Human teachers would serve limited terms, no more than 5 years each. Earth would maintain strong boundaries and would not be drawn back into active council participation. The academy would be independent, funded by the species who sent students, not by Earth. And most importantly, humans would teach but not lead. The student groups would have to solve real problems as part of their training, with humans only guiding, not doing the work for them. 3 months later, the Galactic Diplomatic Academy opened on Sanctuary Moon, a small world in neutral space that had never been claimed by any empire or alliance. The first class included 5,000 students from 347 different species. They came from worlds at war and worlds at peace, from rich empires and poor colonies, from species that breathed oxygen and species that lived in methane clouds. Alina Vasquez became the first headmaster. At 60 years old, she had not expected to return to galactic service. But this felt different. This felt like building something that could last. On opening day, all 5,000 students gathered in the main hall. Alina stood before them, feeling the weight of their expectations and hopes. She kept her speech short and simple. "Welcome to the academy," she began. "You are here because your worlds are broken. Because war and conflict have shown you that the old ways do not work anymore. Because you watched a transmission that showed you what was possible when beings choose cooperation over competition. Understanding over anger, long-term thinking over short-term gain." She paused. Looking across the vast diversity of the room, "I will tell you something important right now. We are not here to solve your problems. Read my lips. We will not fix your broken treaties. We will not negotiate your trade disputes. We will not stop your wars. Those are your jobs now. What we will do is teach you how to do those things yourselves." A murmur went through the crowd. Some students looked disappointed. They had hoped human teachers would return to active galactic diplomacy. It'll be harder than you think, Elena continued. The techniques we use look simple when you watch them, but they require practice, patience, and a willingness to fail and try again. You will make mistakes. You will negotiate agreements that fall apart. You will mediate disputes that end in anger. You will feel like you are not good enough, that you will never be as skilled as the diplomats you saw in the transmission. She smiled softly. That is normal. That is part of learning. I made terrible mistakes in my first 10 years as a diplomat. I caused problems instead of solving them. I made people angrier instead of calmer. But I kept learning. I kept trying. And eventually, I became good at it. You can too. Alina gestured to the other human teachers standing along the walls. Chen, Okonkwo, and 50 others who had agreed to serve as instructors. We believe in you. We believe you are capable of building and maintaining peace yourselves. If we did not believe that, we would not be here. But you must also believe in yourselves. You must be willing to do the hard work of learning these skills and applying them in your own worlds. She took a breath, preparing for her final point. This academy is not about making you act like humans. We are not here to spread human culture or human values. We are here to teach techniques that can work across cultures. You will take what you learn here and adapt it to your own species, your own customs, your own ways of thinking. Peace does not have to look the same everywhere. But the principles of listening, compromise, creative problem-solving, and long-term thinking, those work everywhere. Alina looked at the young faces before her, beings who represented the future of the galaxy. You are the generation that watched the galaxy burn. You saw what happens when cooperation breaks down. You have a choice now. You can let the old patterns continue, waiting for someone else to fix things. Or you can become the beings who fix things yourselves, who solve problems instead of creating them, who build peace instead of waiting for it to be given to you. She paused one last time. What will you choose? The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Then, slowly, students began to stand. First one, then 10, then hundreds, then all 5,000. It was a gesture that crossed cultural boundaries, a physical commitment to the challenge Elena had laid out. The first year was difficult. Students struggled with concepts that seemed simple in theory, but were complex in practice. How do you build trust with someone whose species killed millions of your people? How do you find compromise when both sides want the same thing, and there is not enough for everyone? How do you think long-term when your leaders demand immediate results? Human teachers guided them through exercises, simulations, and real disputes. The Academy partnered with the student groups that had formed after the Warman's transmission, working on actual galactic problems. Some efforts succeeded, many failed. Every failure became a lesson. One of the Academy's first major successes came 8 months after opening. A group of students mediated a border dispute between two minor empires that had been fighting for 6 years. The students made mistakes. They almost gave up 3 times, but they kept trying, applying what they had learned, adapting human techniques to fit the cultures they were working with. When the two empires finally signed a peace agreement, Alina watched the signing ceremony via transmission. The agreement was not perfect. Human diplomats could have probably negotiated better terms, but it was good enough. And more importantly, it was theirs. The students had done it themselves. Alina allowed herself to cry tears of pride. The war between the Methodian Empire and Cassian Alliance finally ended after 18 months of fighting. The ceasefire that had started after the Warman's transmission had slowly evolved into peace talks. Academy students, working with the young mediators who had started the process, helped both sides find a path to peace. The final treaty was signed in the council chamber on Centrum Prime. The chamber had been empty for over a year, but for this occasion, it was filled again. Representatives from 200 species attended, watching as ancient enemies agreed to peace. The treaty was not as comprehensive as the buffer zone agreement humans had maintained for 60 years. It would require constant work to maintain. But both sides were committed to making it work. They had learned at terrible cost. What happened when they did not? Alina watched the signing from Earth. She did not attend in person. This was not a human achievement. This was the galaxy learning to save itself. The years that followed were not perfect. The galaxy still had conflicts. Disputes still arose. Some of the Academy graduates succeeded in preventing wars. Others failed and had to watch situations escalate into violence. But slowly, gradually, the galaxy was changing. Species were learning to talk to each other before shooting, to look for compromise before demanding total victory, to think about what their children would inherit instead of only what they could gain today. 10 years after the Academy opened, Alina retired as headmaster. She was 70 years old and ready to truly rest. She passed the position to Ambassador Chen, who would become an excellent teacher. On her last day, Alina walked through the Academy grounds. She saw students from species that had been enemies learning to work together. She heard debates about negotiation techniques conducted in a dozen languages. She watched practice mediations where young beings made mistakes and learned from them. This was her legacy. Not the treaties she had personally negotiated, not the wars she had personally prevented, but this, a new generation learning to do it themselves. Maria, who had become one of the Academy's administrators, walked with Alina to the shuttle that would take her home to Earth. "Do you think it will last?" Maria asked. "What we have built here." Alina smiled. "Nothing lasts forever. Maybe in 100 years or 1,000 years, this Academy will close. Maybe the galaxy will fall apart again. But for now, we have given them the tools to save themselves. What they do with those tools is up to them." She looked up at the stars, at the vast galaxy that had almost destroyed itself. "That is all anyone can do. Teach the next generation to be better than we were, and then trust them to do it." As the shuttle lifted off, carrying Alina home to Earth for the final time, she felt at peace. The galaxy was broken, but it was healing. Not because humans had fixed it, but because the galaxy was learning to fix itself, and that, Alina thought, was worth everything.